final location of the new Cincinnati Union Terminal was now settled. The Pennsylvania Railroad and the Norfolk and Western, which was partially owned by the Pennsy, was sufficiently appeased with passenger access to the new terminal via the B&O's connection near Norwood. In earlier episodes of the series, it was determined after much study that the most appropriate location for the new Union Terminal facility was the Mill Creek Valley on the east side of the creek. The Western Hills Viaduct would open Mill Creek Valley to allow additional rail connections with sufficient height clearance for trains to travel unimpeded into and out of the new facility. The area under construction for the terminal and facilities was to be about 2.5 miles long, and for more than half its length was to have a width of 1,500 feet. Now came the hard part. While the considerations of many factors was involved in the selection of the site was not without its drawbacks. Not the least of these was the seasonal flooding of the Ohio River and its tributaries, including the adjacent Mill Creek. As a reminder to our viewers, the two most used of the Cincinnati 5 train stations was the Central Union Depot and the Pennsylvania Railroad Station, which were frequently closed due to high water. As a result, it was decided to build the station tracks of the new Union Terminal at an elevation of 512 feet above sea level, an elevation higher than any recorded flood in the Cincinnati area to that time. The remaining tracks were not to be lower than 595 feet above sea level. This decision required that at least 240 acres of the new station site to be elevated with fill material. The average fill depth was 16 feet, and to appreciate the enormity of this task, 5.7 million cubic yards of fill material were required. The amount of fill was not the only element rendering this a difficult task. Many steps had to be taken before filling could be completed. For example, the site chosen for the terminal building itself was already occupied by the classification yard of the Cincinnati Southern Railway. Just a quick detour here for a bit of clarification. The Cincinnati Southern Railway, built by the city of Cincinnati in the 1870s, was leased around 1881 to the Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific Railroad, which itself was acquired by the Southern Railway in 1894. From this point forward, we shall refer to the Cincinnati Southern and the CNOTP simply as the Southern. Now, back to our story. The Southern's classification yard had to be shifted to the west to accommodate the new terminal. The Southern's loop also had to be shortened so as to not extend north of Guest Street. New freight stations and facilities also had to be built for the Southern. This in turn required westward shifting of the Chesapeake and Ohio of Indiana's main line. If you're interested in the C&O of Indiana history, check out our video on the Cincinnati Railroad Club YouTube channel. Finally, streets and parts of streets had to be vacated, dwellings had to be raised, and industries had to be shifted and bridges had to be built to carry the new tracks over A Street and Guest Street. The construction of Cincinnati Union Terminal was preceded by one of the largest fill and grading jobs up to that time. Grading and filling was begun in August of 1929. A careful and complex grade and fill schedule was developed so that the many tasks could be integrated and carried out simultaneously, including the construction of the Western Hills Viaduct, without interfering with each other. To this end, the area was divided into some 9 numbered zones. The work went quickly and well. The Southern took possession of its new yard in June 1930, and the fill and grading work was completed in less than 24 months. To accomplish the fill part of the project, Bald Knob Ridge, a rough, isolated, thorn-covered peak on the wall of bluffs to the west of the Mill Creek, was obtained by the Cincinnati Union Terminal Company for the bulk of the fill. Bald Knob was so situated that the fill material would only have to be transported some 3.5 miles on the C&O of Indiana to the terminal work site. Fortunately, this was done without grade crossings and coordinated with scheduled C&O traffic. The peak at Bald Knob had a ledge on the north side of it, which served as an excellent location for the contractor's assembling, dispatching, and maintenance yard. Bald Knob was so configured as to permit an approach line to its top in the form of a continuous counterclockwise spiral and a track length of some 7,000 feet. The soil of Bald Knob Ridge was composed of heavy clay and shale with a thick strata of rock. As a consequence, blasting was required, much to the chagrin of the local neighborhood. The first step in obtaining fill from Bald Knob was the use of caterpillar shovels to prepare a roadbed for the spiral loading track. This loading track was soon supplemented by a second track for double track operation. As a second step, when the loading track had been sufficiently advanced, excavation was begun at the grade level of the track, but was continued in such a way that the shovels were about 45 feet below the loading track. A Marion Model 350 shovel and a Marion Model 300 shovel were used. These were huge machines of the strip mining type, each having 8 cubic yard dippers. When working at the above 45-foot level below the loading track, these machines excavated a cut 100 feet wide at the bottom and 175 feet wide at the top against a face that at times was as much as 135 feet high. They had a 90-foot loading reach. To prepare fill material for the shovels, Armstrong electric well drills were used to drill 5.5-inch diameter holes on 20-foot centers, some 20 feet in back of each cut. These holes were filled with explosive delivered from the contractor's supply yard to the top of the hill by cableway. The material from Bald Knob Ridge was thus rendered by blasting into a form engageable by the shovel dippers. The fill material was delivered by the shovels to 30-yard capacity Western Air dump cars made up into trains of from 6 to 9 cars. With both big shovels working, 4 trains were kept busy with loads and empties. For the actual side of the terminal building itself, along with the engine facility and coach yards, selected low settlement fill was required. This fill was obtained from a borrow pit on a farm at Milepost 16 on the C&O of Indiana line. This same location provided the topsoil for the station plaza. Excavation was handled by the same sort of large shovel, and the material derived was carried on trains of air dump cars averaging 18 cars per train. Some truck hauling was used in isolated fill areas of the terminal area, not readily accessible by train. Most of the fill material was simply dumped at the trackside, although some 6,300 feet of filling trestle was used in 10 different locations. The contractor chosen for this enormous job was Winston Brothers Company of Minneapolis, Minnesota. This company was one of the largest earth-moving contractors in the world. For this job, the contractor employed 300 men in 2 10-hour shifts. No doubt from 1929 to 1931, this was hard but steady work during the opening days of the Great Depression. The Winston Brothers Company used 7 80-ton locomotives and 3 smaller locomotives, along with 122 air dump cars, each with a 30-yard capacity. The contractor maintained a full work camp, including a 300-ton coaling tower, a 20,000-gallon water tank, and an equipment repair shop on site. In total, some 5.3 million cubic yards of fill material were taken from Bald Knob. The Bald Knob material did not, however, consolidate well, resulting in slow settlement. To overcome this difficulty, jetting was used. The remaining portion of the fill material came from Milepost 16, as mentioned earlier, on the C&O of Indiana line. The reason for the slow settlement was not only due to the nature of the bald knob material itself, but also to the fact that the filling and grading project was carried out during 2 years of relatively little rain. In addition, the construction schedule was ahead of that projected, so that the full 2 years for settlement originally planned was shortened. Finally, some of the terrain filled was very irregular, with marked differences in depth and relatively short distances, adding to the settlement problem. The site, as we mentioned in an earlier episode, had been used as an industrial landfill and a fishing lake. The water jetting project to speed up the slow settlement problem was a large one. In accordance with this procedure, water in just the right amount was forced down into the fill material to consolidate it. Each jetting operation was accomplished with a 10-foot length of 2-inch pipe. The upper end of the 2-inch pipe had a 90-degree bend and was attached to a standard 2.5-inch fire hose. Each jetting operation took 3 or 4 men, and the entire jetting project cost about $28,000. Today, Bald Knob Ridge still stands majestically to the west and north of the terminal. With the return of vegetation, only its somewhat peculiar shape remains to remind us of the feverish activity that once surrounded it and the part that it played in the construction of the Cincinnati Union Terminal. We hope you've enjoyed this program. Join us next time as we continue with Part 5 of the series, when we delve into the next stages of the Cincinnati Union Terminal construction. If you like this type of content, hit the thumbs up button below and share our videos with your friends. It helps the channel out. And please hit the subscribe button to be notified of new videos on our channel. We'd like to thank the Cincinnati Railroad Club and its members for the support in making these videos and our channel possible. Until we meet next time on the High Iron, stay safe out there.